Mostly about videography and photography.
Okay, what about them?
I feel like it's been like ever since I came, it's probably one of the things that has made me get really into journalism and child advocacy.
Okay, so what about videography and photography makes you want to be part of it so that you can also now hook it up with the practice of journalism?
I guess I'm not really sure yet, but I guess it's just something that makes me happy.
Okay, so do you take pictures? Because I can see you have both cameras on. Is that a thing that you're always doing?
Yeah, most of the time.
Okay, all right. Somebody else who would want to ask something about the behind the scene. We call them #BTS, behind the scenes.
Interviews, like pre-interviews.
Yes. What about them?
Like, for example, yesterday when we were there, we were doing some interviews ourselves. Like, sometimes you find out that you lack words to say.
Yeah.
But when you see it on the TV, you see it is really flowing. It doesn't
Yeah.
have any errors. Like, how do you do it?
How do you do that? Okay, excellent. One more chance for somebody else. Ladies, you're very quiet. And gentlemen, what's your name?
Melanie.
Melanie. So, you've seen people do their thing, whether it's adults like me or young children, you know, like in a generation 3 and all that. See, those are kids, but they do this stuff and it looks easy. But what have you always wondered?
What are the struggles they went through before perfecting it?
It looks perfect, right? I see. Good. Good one. Good one. So, I'll tell you this. And this is something you will learn as you go along. They say journalism is the theater of the mind to a very large degree. And in this case, especially broadcast. Okay? And we'd call it the theater of the mind is because what I broadcast to you is not necessarily a reflection of what's happening behind the scenes. Okay? Now, I don't know if some of you have come across certain pictures where you see journalists put up pictures of behind the scenes and they are wearing a coat tie shirt up here, but down there they're wearing shorts and slippers. Have you seen that? Did it, when you were watching them, did it stop them from doing what they were doing? Yeah. But when you watch them, it looks perfect. But the behind the scenes looks, yeah, very odd and tidy, everything everywhere, right? Yeah. So what does that tell you? At the end of the day, it's not where you practice it. It's the skill sets that you have, right? Yeah? For example, we all know how to speak English here. If I took you to which country? China. Yeah? You might have a hard time communicating with the Chinese because they might not understand English, but does that take away your ability to speak English?
No.
Exactly. Now, do you see how that makes sense? All right. So now, journalism, the why, the reason why I asked the why is because it is so important for you to understand the reasons that are pushing you towards the profession. Why? Because that why is what will keep you going. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because you don't do 18 years of this because it's a smooth sail or it's a bed of roses. It has a lot of challenges. You brought up the challenges and you wonder how this looks perfect. Truth of the matter is, it's not easy. You guys are young enough or old enough to have seen at least one election, right?
Yes.
2017, Cynthia?
Yes.
So you understand or even see what some of the things that happen in the news? Cops running, people running, being beaten and stuff like that. But who brings you the news? The journalists. Have you ever wondered, and maybe you have heard, that some of them perhaps get into trouble? Beaten by the same cops? Or beaten by the same people they're trying to bring the news about? So that means you have to put your life at risk to actually bring the news to you, right? So do you see that's a challenge and it's a sacrifice you have to make?
Yes.
So if you're not very sure about why you're doing this in the first place, the first thing unaenda unakimbizana na polisi wanatwanga wewe, utarudi tena? If you're not very sure?
No.
Would you?
No.
Would you go back to doing journalism because your mom told you go do journalism?
No.
Or daddy said you have to be a journalist? With that kind of scenario, would you?
No.
But if it's something that you love to do, something that you've been fascinated about, as he said, he loves pictures, photography, and videography, then it helps you keep going back to do this thing, right? So the first time you make a mistake, you tell yourself it's okay, because I want to get here. I need to work on what I'm making mistakes on so that I can be a better person. That brings the point of there's no perfection, but when you work at it, you get better at it. Okay? I'll give you a good example. When I started out in, let me tie this to, it starts with a why. There's something that attracts you to the profession. My mother tells me, just like my dear son over there, that I have always been very talkative since I was a child. You know that child, wageni wakikuja mami anakuweka mdomo zile za please, usiongee sana. Have you ever seen kids like those? Yeah. They just won't stop talking, you know? Or they're very comfortable amongst adults. Wageni wakikam, you're being told go play. No, you're the one seated there listening to what people have to say. That was so me, okay? And I would chime into the conversations with the adults. So my parents just did not understand what is it about you. But I would actually hold a conversation with adults. You know, I was curious to understand how the world of adulthood, I guess, was happening or working, enough for me to ask the right questions. That in itself said that I was curious. Do you hear me? Say the word curious?
Curious.
Curious. That in itself is such a great element for any journalist, because you want to know why. So you have the why that brings you to the job, and there's a why something is happening, right? Okay. So I never knew, of course, at that age what that meant. Then eventually I realized that there are some things that came naturally to me. When you're in school, see, there's normally English literacy. Who's doing CBC, baby? Watu wa CBC wako wapi? Au ingine ni 844 kama sisi? Don't you worry. It still is the same, but more practical for the CBC students. But there's English literacy, the one that you actually read. Sisi watu hufanya kusoma, reading, and then the writing, compositions, and things like those, yeah? Now, those things might not make sense to you now, but the truth of the matter is, if you're good at speaking, isn't that something that you see that happens with stories? They're not done off the top of their heads. They have to be written down. Okay? So when you see a nice feature, nice documentary, it means somebody went and did the videography, did the photography, then sat down and put together the story well enough to bring their thoughts together so that when they edit it, you get to understand the story and be very interested. Okay? So I noticed in school, what came naturally to me was the reading, you know, and the writing. So those compositions that you always wonder, why do they make us write compositions? Trust you me, they are actually equipping you for such, you know, careers as journalism, so that it comes easy for you to write down your thoughts and also make them interesting. Do you remember, and when you think back, the people who get the best marks in compositions are the ones that make them so interesting? Yeah? Like they play around with their words, make the story interesting, have a good intro, have a good ending. Cindy? Yeah, it's like watching a movie. When you're watching a movie, so you want it to keep you interested. It's the same thing with a story. I want to inform you, but I want to keep you glued for the amount of time the story is on air for you to actually understand why the story was brought to you in the first place. Okay? Now, as I grew older, I realized that apart from being curious, the fact that I was very good in my languages and all that, I realized that you just don't wake up and become a journalist. You have to train for it. Okay, so I went to school. I went to Daystar University, and I did mass communications and psychology. And when I did that, now I realized there is actually a craft behind all this. You've discovered videography at a very young age. Super cool. As guys were always wondered, picha utoka aje? You know, like how do you capture and for it to come out in the way it does? And what skill set does it take for you to do that? So that's what you learn in school. So it gives you more skill sets of how to use a camera, how to do editing, how to make use of your voice in a way that keeps your audience interested. Right? Because if somebody came here and started talking and you started getting bored, will you remember what they said?
No.
But somebody who is interesting, you will always remember something about what they said, right? A good journalist learns the art of doing that. Okay? Because if you are not remembered, then you don't have impact. Does that make sense? Okay? If you go out there and do, I don't know, whatever it is that you do, that you love to do, will that person remember you? Will you be remembered? Will you feel good about it? Really? If you think about it? No, not really. Impact is actually actualized by if somebody is a recipient of your work, right? Exactly. So, after I came out of school, I went into the working world, and in this case, for you to graduate from university, we do something called internship, okay? Internship gives you experience of work. So you've been taught, now let's come and experience it in the working world. Sindio? Ni kama practice sasa. Si umefunzwe. See, when we're in school, we do the learning and then we do the exams. Now look at it as the practical exam. All right? So you've gone into the working world. They've given you an opportunity to prove yourself. That now gives you an opportunity to feel how it is being in the real world. Now in the real world, there is no time for atikudili darling. Your boss tells you, go find me this story. Now, if I don't have the skill set of how to get a story, where to get the story, okay, and how to get that story, will I bring back anything? No. So it's important that I should have learned what I did in school, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So now when you go there, you learn that there is the art of speed, okay, and precision that comes with the job. When you see that 1 o'clock news, see the kuna 1 o'clock news, ile ya saa saba. There are times where I have been sent for a story at 11:30 and it's supposed to go for 1 p.m. I go, come back, script it, edit it, and it has to be on air by 1. Is there much time?
No.
So if you're not very swift and smart about how you do your job, you're bound to drop the ball, right? Okay? Yeah. So you learn to go to the field, understand how the story is going to be brought about so that it's interesting, come back, put something together, and if you're smart, now that we have smartphones, we didn't have those back in the day, you can be able to script something quickly, send it to WhatsApp, download it when you get to the office, and go and read it, edit it, and voila. 1 p.m. you have your story. Now, when you listen to that, are you seeing how all the skill sets that I touched on and also the talent that I discovered when I was younger come full circle? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Yes. So that's what you're being equipped with now, all right? Because if you understand the job, how to do it, and you have the passion, everything comes together. But as somebody said, even with all the talent in the world, if you don't put hard work, it's nothing. Okay. So a lot of hard work goes into this. Okay? These journalists from different companies, what do you think will differentiate them?
If you're interesting, if your stories are more digestible.
Aha. Great. Somebody else? What will make the difference between the 3 or 4 or whatever channels that you watch?
Maybe the experience of the journalist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, somebody else? Do you have something? Yes.
How you report.
How you report in terms of the language or how you speak? Oh, okay.
Oh, the story is interesting.
Okay. Now there's something else that perhaps you haven't mentioned, but it's very important. The journalist needs to be good, because if they're not on time, si sasa itawapita. Yes.
Truthful.
Good. Something else. Somebody at the back, videographers. Okay, somebody. Anyone. Na naona hii table mmenyamaza sana. Ladies, I need to hear something from you. Yes.
Independence and objective.
Good.
The journalists need to be creative.
Good one. Ladies, yes.
Journalists be disciplined.
Yes.
Think critically.
Good. So that means thinking beyond the obvious. right? Yes.
Accountability.
What does that mean in this case?
You must be there for people
Mm-hmm.
when they want you to report for them the needs that they have.
Mm-hmm. And do it well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you told us that, let's say you're presenting at 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and in that time given, you're supposed to prepare yourself.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what you're going to know, like the story? Do they send it to you?
I'll get to that question in a bit when we're doing the Q&A. So at this point, let me pause on that. Be thinking about some of the questions you'd like to pose to me so that we walk through some of the elements that I've touched on, okay? So whether it's from talent, whether it's from getting this work, all right? And ensuring that you sustain your career, because again, we said talent without hard work, you not get anywhere far, right? Yeah. Exactly. There has to be something about you that makes you keep going. And that's why I asked you what makes the difference between the different journalists. For example, you say, I like watching NTV and I like watching this journalist. I'm sure there's something about Cynthia. Yeah. All right. Now, when you think about others, okay, think about what it is that you would do that will be better than they are. I'll give you, or same or better. I'll give you an example and the reason why I'm putting this out there. When I was in campus, university that is, and they had just launched a radio station called Family Radio. Are you okay? Okay, ask you, the auntie behind you. Okay, all right. So, have you heard of Family Radio? Yeah. They call it now something 316. John 316. Okay, something like that. So it had just started, and they used to have 3 presenters that stood out for me. There was Robert Warobi, there was James Okumu, and there was Tina Nzuki. Some of the older ones in the room, perhaps you know about Tina, right? Tina Nzuki. Yeah. Right now, I think she's with. What is it? What is it called? It's a gospel radio station where they are with the DJ Soxy. I forget. Okay, it will come to me. So I remember listening to them when I was still, I think I was in 2nd or 3rd year, and the way they spoke and what they talked about made me want to switch on my radio every morning to listen to them. I loved the way they spoke. I loved their command of language. I loved their voices. I loved the content they gave, because that content really uplifted me and gave me so much direction in the journey that I was on. And I thought to myself, if I'm ever given an opportunity to do what they do, that's what I would like to do for somebody else. Okay? That's what we're talking about, impact. Okay? Impact. Somebody doesn't have to have met you in person, but because you have this sphere of influence, and the sphere of influence is actually journalism, right? With journalism, television, radio, print, digital now, you get to talk to masses of people, right? Yeah. Exactly. So you can either make or break, and I'm sure you guys are learning about that, right? Yeah. So you can build a country, for example, or you can bring it to its knees. And history has a few examples to show that. But the question is, when you become that person that somebody is listening to every single day or watching, what impact do you leave? You've got to think about that. Because it's not about being a superstar. Si ati unataka kuonekana kwa TV useme mi ufanya show ama mi uonekana nikisoma news, si ndio? Yeah. It goes beyond that. And that's where impact and sustainability of your career, that's where they meet. Okay? And now, do you see how my listening to these guys and hooked by what they did and how they did it also gave me my why?
Your why?
My why. Why? We're not talking about wine here, darling. Why? Remember the first thing I asked you, your why. Why do you want to do this? And I can actually be very proud of this, and I think anyone who's been listening to me as long as I have been on broadcast understands that my mission is to use my sphere of influence to positively impact those that I come across. All right? So whether by what I do, what I did in radio, which I did for 7 years, okay, or what I did in television for as long as I was there, okay, yeah, it needs to be, you don't remember me because, Gladys has a nice voice, Gladys is pretty. No, they'd help for you to watch, sindio? So kitu kizuri you would want to understand what they have to say. However, there's more to that. After ushapatana na msichana mrembo, kama hana points, siyo story naishi hapo? Same thing with a guy, sindio? He can be all handsome, but if he has nothing to offer, what are we looking at? There's a lizard, don't you? It's a gecko. They are the most harmless things. Yeah, but are you understanding? You've got to have substance, okay? And substance is actually measured by the impact you have. So this is not about how I want to get into journalism because I want to be famous. It's not about how many followers you'll have on your socials. It's about the impact that you have. Enough for people want to be associated with you because they want your brand, which is what you build over time, okay? All right? So when you heard or you saw me here, what's the first thing you thought? For those that didn't know I was coming. When you saw me here, what's the first thing you thought?
You're just another lady.
You didn't know about me. Okay, who knew about me? Who knows about me? Who knows about Gladys Gachanja? Of course, you're my son, you know about me. You know about me?
Yeah.
What do you know about what I do?
You're a news broadcaster.
Mm-hmm.
And also you work at NTV.
Mm-hmm.
And the pronunciation.
My pronunciation?
Yeah.
You mean articulation of words? Okay, all right. Now, whatever it is that you like in the journalist that you'd want to grow up to be, ensure that you understand the things we talked about. Why you want to be a journalist. Ensure that you have what it takes to sustain this thing that you want. All right? Which means what? A little bit of talent, a little bit of skill set, and what?
Accountability.
Hard work. Okay. Now, all these other things you're talking about are the ethics of practicing the craft. Okay?
Yeah.
Which are very important, because if you misuse the platform you're on, yeah, again, you can make or break. All right? And also you can water down the profession, because the media is considered the fourth estate. The first is state. The second is, have you been taught about that? So they call us the fourth estate because we keep the government accountable. So we will bring to you and question things that the government won't question. So when there's corruption in the country, in the government, who tells you that something is off?
Journalists.
Exactly. They will go and ask the right questions to ensure that you keep the government accountable. So how can you keep accountable somebody if you're not accountable yourself? Do you see how it works?
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, so I'm going to leave it to that and now take questions. I think we can do that now. Yes. First, let me answer your question, right? So the question was, how do we get the stories? Okay, when you're in a newsroom. So every single day when you get into the newsroom, most newsrooms have a practice. You have an editorial meeting where you give ideas of stories that you'd want to do. Okay? So I'm sure you've had a bit of experience in that. Things that you're interested in that you'd want to put across. Okay? So whether it's a school that doesn't have a playground, and we know how important it is for kids to have a playground, right? So was it grabbed? Who grabbed it? Why is it being condoned? And how and what can be done to get the land back? Maybe that's what has interested you, okay? So you tell your editor, who is the boss, the guy who leads the newsroom, and you have to ensure now you have good leads, which means you've got to talk to who? In such a story, who do you need to talk to bring it around?
Editor.
So my boss has told me, fine, it's a good story, go and do it. But for him to tell me it's a good story, there's some elements about a story that I always have to be there. Have they talked about? They've been taught this. What brings together a credible story? What do you have to have? So I've given you an example. There's a school whose playground was grabbed. Yeah? And they want it back. So who do you talk to first? Say anything. No, there's no wrong answer here.
Qualities of a good story, guys.
Yeah, qualities of a good story.
Do you talk to God?
You'll ask God to give you wisdom to do the story well. However,
Remember on Tuesday?
yes,
We'll go to the school owner and talk to him.
talk to the school owner, right? Yeah, head teacher, whoever it is that is
Yes.
leading the school. Good. And why would you talk to them? So that you understand
You understand why.
the problem, right? Okay, after that, who else do you need to talk to?
What I know, the story has to have human interest.
Exactly. So after you talk to the teacher, who else do you talk to?
The children,
Good one. Why?
to know how they feel about it.
Good. So far, you humanizing, because the problem is their land has been grabbed. Who is affected? The kids. So they're the face of the story, right? Okay. And the third person you need to find out or talk to?
MP of the area.
Yeah? Be confident. Be
Of
confident.
the area.
MP of the area. Why? Just say it. It's okay. Just say it. Why do you think it's important for the member of parliament to speak into your story?
In order to get more sustainable advices.
So to get more information about what exactly happened about it, because he's the leader of the area, so he should know about it and explain why it was taken away, right? Okay. All right. There's somebody we have jumped here. Who else is important in this story? We've talked to the principal, who understands the issue. We've talked to the kids. We've talked about the member of parliament. Who else is important?
Teachers or parents?
Good. Yes. Because at the end of the day, kids are what? They have guardians, right? Yeah. When I take my child to school, I expect that the school has what? All the amenities to ensure that it safeguards your well-being as a child, right? And play is one of them, right? So the parents need to speak to the story to understand how, or to say, this is how it has affected the development of my children, or the teachers saying how it's affected the development of the children. Then after that, who do you talk to? The last person in the story. Yes.
Governor.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you didn't get the MP, yes, you can talk to the governor. But who else? Who ensures that not Tom, Dick and Harry walks in and takes something from you?
Wakaaji. Watu wanakaa hapo. The community.
That's also important. It's actually a voice you can put in. But who ensures that somebody just doesn't wake up and come and say, I've taken your pen?
Let's say the people who grabbed the land.
Well, it would be interesting actually to hear. That's a right of reply. Yes, that's important. That's actually very important. The person who's been accused of taking the land. All right, somebody else? There's one person who ensures that you and I live free and, free and secure and all that. Who? Let me hear from. Huh? Yes. Yes.
The police.
Good. Security. All right. And this could be in the case of the police in this case, because they're the ones who ensure that we don't walk around taking anything we want from other people, right? Exactly. Now, when all those voices come together, then you have an idea, or everyone has a way of putting their voice into the story enough for you to have covered all your bases. If you don't have any of these stories, your own editor will tell you, hii story haijaiva. Hii story haijaiva. Unajua ukipika chakula alafu hakuna chumvi? Chakula iko sawa lakini kachumvi kana miso, taste haijashika. Same thing. Look at it that way. All right? You've got to have these stories to support your story. These voices to support your story and give it credibility. And there are times some of those voices will not be very keen to speak to you. But you can always, and I'm sure you've been taught, you can always come back and say, we try to reach out to, for example, the MP of the area or the governor of the county, and they were unreachable. Okay? Or we try to talk to the guy who has been accused of grabbing the land, and they were not reachable. Okay? All right. So that's how it works in a newsroom. Okay? So give ideas, and at times it's not your idea. You'll be given a story that is actually happening now, and you go and cover. For example, elections are coming up. you'll be sent to Kibra to cover. Yeah? So you need to understand how to cover elections. All right?
Even the school committee are also important.
Yes, all those fall under the Teacher Parent Association. Okay? Any other question?
When
You had asked about interviews, right?
yeah.
Add the other question. Now I answer both of them.
You said you are watching the people in the family radio and they impact you, right? And you said that they command their words. How exactly?
Okay, so I'll start with the other question. Do you remember she asked, what is it about interviews and how do they flow? You always wonder, now that you've been taught about interviewing skills, right? Now, there are different kinds of journalists, and depending on your talent and also personalities, because they all come to play. There are journalists that you will see will go sit in front of the interviewee, and they'll shoot questions without referencing to anything. Yeah? Then you will see journalists who go with a pad, all right? They're either scribbling or referring to questions or iPad or computer, right? Which one do you think is more qualified? Huh?
The one who goes with a pad and an iPad or a computer.
Ladies, who do you think is more qualified? Huh? Why do you think they're qualified? Why do you think they're more qualified than the guy who writes? Or rather, the guy who comes without anything?
Because they have their questions and they know what they are going to ask.
Okay. Why do you think they're more qualified? Or do you have a different opinion between the guy who comes without anything and the guy who actually shoots questions from their pad?
The one who will go with questions, he will structure his questions and he will make a good rapport. But the one who goes without anything, he will forget things that he was told, even the quote or the interviewee. Yeah.
Okay. Now, all of you are right. All of you are right. There's actually no wrong answer here. This is, again, what I just alluded to. We are different. We've got different personalities. We grasp things differently. And our art of doing things is also different. Cynthia? Yeah? So, the same way I clean my shoes and the next person is perhaps different. We have the same shoes, but we treat them differently. But at the end of the day, tukikam si tumengara tu. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? What you need to be careful with, and I'm sure you've been taught this, and I'm glad that you're bringing up such pertinent points, is if you're the person who walks in and shoots from the hip without, a book or somewhere you're writing notes, then you better have a good skill set that helps you retain what the person is saying, right? And also, you're very good at remembering what the brief was, and that you're able to do follow-up questions and come up with a 360 interview, right? Because at the end of the day, the expectation of every interview does not matter the interviewing style. The results have to be the same, okay? So you as a journalist, you have to tell yourself, you can appear that way or you can write it down. What makes you the best version of you? I come from the school of thought. I like writing stuff down. The more I write, the more I remember, and the more thoughts flow, okay? And it also gives me a way to pace myself and ensure that I do not forget anything, all right? That does not make me a lesser journalist than the guy who comes and does things off the top of their heads, okay? So as long as you're able to cover have you done the 5 W's? Yeah, which are what?
Why, what, where, when.
And their H? Exactly. How? As long as you're able to cover that, and you're able to bring out of that interview more than what somebody can Google and get, you've done your job. Okay? So learn, practice, which works best for you. Off the top of your head, if you feel it doesn't give you the confidence you need, write down your points, write down your questions, and even as they speak and they bring up a point that you'd like to follow up at some point, note it down. Okay, all right. So that is actually a preference, but of course in journalism school, you're encouraged to actually write down. Okay, any other question?
Why do we?
Wait, have I answered all your questions? No. Second one was about commanding. What about them? Or how did they?
You did say that you like the way they command their words.
Yes.
How exactly?
It's the enunciation. Okay? How you speak. There's something about, how do I put this? We are all not gifted the same way, right? Okay? I speak a different way. And if this next person came and perhaps did not have the same strength in the way they speak, does not water down what they're saying. Okay? Yeah? But actually what matters is what they're saying. Does that make sense? In journalism, content matters. Content matters. And yes, first impressions are everything. For example, if I came here and you heard that I speak well, you would want to listen to me more because I speak a certain way. So I've already ticked one box. I have your attention. If I came here and I had a challenge in the way I pronounce words, for example, I say instead of road, I say the load. You perhaps will hang on to the fact that I said load more than what I'm saying. But after I've been speaking for 5 to 10 minutes, you will get desensitized and now start listening to what I'm saying. Now, the thing about journalism, you don't have the leeway of 10 minutes later where somebody is listening to you, right? You've come done a story or you're doing an interview, it's 2 minutes long. Okay? If I lose my audience in those 2 minutes, my message is not home, right? So you will find there are people who will shy away from doing broadcast and choose to do print because they're better at writing, or enunciating words is a bit difficult for them. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because for us, even for you to even read, you know, like do a voiceover for your story, you're not told because you've started work and osome. You've got to do practice. They've got to listen. And if you actually pass a certain threshold, they give you, they go ahead to write. So most interns will come in, do stories, and for the first few weeks, the senior anchors are the ones, or reporters are the ones who are told, come and read for them their story. You get? But in the meantime, they're practicing to ensure that they enunciate well, okay, and that they deliver the story in a way that it's interesting. Okay, so just because you want to do journalism but you cannot speak like I do does not mean we don't have any other mediums that you can engage in, right? Right now we have what? We have broadcast, we have print, we have digital, and right now digital is really huge. Okay, so never feel just because you cannot speak or you're shy that you cannot practice the art of journalism. Okay, yeah. So for me, they caught my eye because, again, remember the talent I've had since I was a kid? Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I love this combination and I love the fact that they have content that actually has impact.
Yeah. So what is the meaning of this phrase? When a dog bites a man, that's not news. But when a man bites a dog, that's news.
Well, I'm glad that you've come across that. It's one of those catch-22 things that I have found in this industry. When I come and tell you, example, yeah, a dog beat a man. It is in the DNA of a dog, animal, to bite a human being. So hapo hakuna story. Actually, the next question would be, how serious was it? Kama aliumwa tu kidogo tu akaenda first aid na ako sawa, si story imeishia hapo. But if the person was beaten and perhaps took off his cuff or something, the story will get a bit sweeter, right? However, if you had that a man went, ran after a dog and beat it, yeah, and removed a chunk of its meat out, what's the first thing you think?
Crazy man.
Do you see how now that is more of an interesting story than your usual animal doing what exactly they do?
Yeah.
Okay? And that's why I'm sure you've heard this, that bad news sells. bad news sells. Have you noticed when you're watching news with your folks or your parents that for some reason all the stories are about sad things? From story 1 to, you rarely find like a story for now, to a happy moment where this family was given, food and clothing by good Samaritans, and it comes over here at the end, right? Yeah. When the newspapers, they say the newspapers that sell the most are the ones with the worst headline. It's unfortunate, but your curiosity is actually ticked by things that happen outside the box. And that's what that statement means. Now, is it the best way to do business? Not necessarily. There needs to be a balance. Because at the end of the day, I should not be watching the news at night and feeling worse than I should have felt, if I stayed away from it. It's supposed to inform me. But we as journalists should be in a position where we do a balance. Because within a world where bad things are happening, good things are also. And those things you should also source for them to ensure you put them in the limelight. And that's what happens. Good things get ignored. Great strides get ignored just because they are not hot enough. For example, yeah? You know what I mean? Do you hear me? Yeah. For example, children every single day die out of infectious diseases like malaria. You're right? But you will not hear stories about malaria until a child dies. But does that mean malaria doesn't exist? Shouldn't you learn more about how to prevent malaria? Do you see how you need to strike the balance? And it also falls back to accountability as you're being taught. Okay? All right. Any other question? Yes.
Why do we have types of journalists?
What do you mean by types?
Because we have like business journalists. We have like sports, data journalism, and why?
Okay. All right. So, as I started off, and I think I'll even give you my own experience, I eventually, in my years of doing this practice, I realized that I had the heart for conversations around gender, children, health. Okay? These three things somehow intertwine. Why? When you think about women and children, which touches on the gender, but of course boys are also part of it. By the way, do not be fooled. When we say gender, we don't mean girls. Yeah, male is also a gender. The point is, when all these things are not balanced out, they feed off each other. And whether or not they're balanced or not, they actually feed off each other. If a mother has her children who are sick, this mother will not be able to do her job, Cindy. See, when you're sick, your mom stays at home to ensure that you go to hospital. And if you need medicine or maybe you're vomiting and all that, she needs to be there to care for you. Sasa kama yeye ndio mwenye kufanya kazi hii nyumba, see, that means you don't have money for food that day. Okay? Which means we have to take care of the health system to ensure that when you're unwell, yeah, mommy can get to hospital fast and get your treatment faster to ensure that you're back on your feet and she can be able to go back to. But wouldn't it even be better if there was more health information so that mommy knows how to protect you, or you know how to protect yourself better so that you're never sick and mommy doesn't have to stop working to take care of you? Do you see how it all comes full circle? Now, I came to that realization of how they all feed off each other for me to say I'm not seeing enough information out there to educate people about health. Okay? So mine was to go out there and have conversations that you and I should know about, but they're never brought to us because they don't make the headlines. They are not our man bites dog, but they're still important. So I chose to specialize on the health and gender side of things. Somebody else could be excellent in, when you went to school, si kuna wale wako sawa in maths, right?
Yeah.
Right? There are people who are more interested in biashara, sindio? Then kuna wale, they are more sporty, watu wa EPL, mnataka watch ball. My son right now is very excited about football and all that. Sindio, watu wa manu, nini, yeah? So you're so interested, whether it's football, F1, rugby, basketball. It's something that comes naturally to you. And you have the love for journalism. Do you see how you can combine those two things? So that's when you get people who specialize in sports, because it is a passion that now feeds into their profession. Okay, again, my passion is to educate people about health matters, so I got into the health space. Somebody else is into politics. No, na squeezy when it comes to those stories, because right now politics is number one. You'll always see they're the ones who do the first 2-3 stories. Those are people, and they're called senior political reporters. That's because they have actually worked at the skill of reporting on politics. Ukamuliza sahi akwambie all member of parliaments, governors, MCAs from whichever county, they have them here. So as much as you have to specialize, it better be something that you love to do and something that you actually are very informed about for you to be a specialist at it. Yeah, so that is a personal choice, and it's something you specialize in after years of practicing, and you say, "Enye hapa, I think this is where I come alive when I'm doing it." Okay? How much time do we have? I think we have 5 more minutes. Yes.
In which type of journalism are you in?
I just said. I'm a broadcast journalist. Okay, which means I've practiced in radio and television. Okay, and of course with the digital era, those two are also working hand in hand. But also my specialty is gender and health. Okay, but that doesn't mean, because I'm a well-trained journalist, that doesn't mean I cannot do any other story. Okay, and you will see during elections, we are all sent out. It doesn't matter whether you do health, you do sports, you do what, the newsroom collapses to one big unit that is catering for politics. Na kila mtu anatumwa kwa different counties. Okay? Yeah. Any other question before we close?
Do you travel a lot because of your occupation?
Yeah, there's some travel involved depending on what it is you're doing and also your specialty. For example, when the Olympics were going on, the sports guys had to go to where? Beijing. They had to go where were the Olympics? In China, right? Exactly, they had to go there. All right. If there is a drought, which is ongoing right now, and where is it? Akina Marsabit, Wajir, and all that. Yeah. You can't talk about a drought that you cannot show people pictures. Sindio? Si lazima ingie gari mwende kule shida iko. Exactly. Yes.
Tulifunza kuna types of journalism. Sasa siku ya election, watu wa the political journalists pekee ndo wanaenda huko kwa mambo ya elections, ama ni watu hata kama uko hata kama uko kama pia wewe ni sports bado tutaenda kwa ya elections.
Ndio tumesema sahi, kama wewe ni journalist, as long as you have the title journalist, kila mtu anafanya siasa. Okay? Because you see, we have 47 counties to cover. Hizo ni counties nyingi. Sindio? Now for us to have a representation in every county, see, that means all the reporters have to be involved. Na unasahau kuna wale anchors watch wapi? Studio. Sindio? So everyone, it doesn't matter what your specialty, when it comes to politics or when there's breaking news. Yeah? It doesn't matter what it is that you specialize on. You all go to cover it. Okay? Yeah. Anything else before we close? Yeah.
How far has you ever traveled?
How far have I ever traveled? I've been to, with work? For work? Yeah. Within this country, Turkana. Yeah, I've done Turkana, I've done Samburu, the northeastern region. Yeah, the northern part of the country. I've done Tanzania, I've done Rwanda in the region. Yeah. Oh, and Uganda. And Uganda. Yes.
Out of Africa?
I have not done out of Africa. Yeah.
I have.
Sorry. Yes. You have? Were you practicing journalism? Okay. Yes.
Are you looking forward to travel outside Africa?
Well, if it needs me to go there to practice what I do, yes. Yes. Yeah. But again, remember, be a professional at what you do at home. They say charity begins
at home.
When you're good at it here, the rest of these opportunities open up.
What if I want to become a journalist and my parents doesn't want me to become a journalist?
Oh, that becomes a tricky one, eh? Because they're the ones who are paying school fees, yeah? Now, this is where you really need to pray, as you were saying, talk to God, to give you wisdom on how to actually encourage and appeal to your parents that this is where your heart is in, okay? But then again, they say, and I'm sure perhaps this has been taught to you, that who has a mentor here? Do you know what a mentor is?
Yeah.
Who has mentors here? You do? And your mentor is an adult? Exactly. Now, when your mentor understands what you need to do and your passions, okay, they can also help you appeal to your parents. All right? And if they totally refuse, I have seen people I went to school with did what their parents forced them to do. And after they were done, they went back and did what they did, what they wanted. Okay? So at times it can be tough, especially if they will not budge. Okay? But if they budge, well and good. If they don't, you've got to do what needs to be done, because at the end of the day, ndio wanalipa nini? School fees. But whatever it is that you choose, better be something that actually makes your heart tick. Yeah? And also find a way to make it the best. Because they say at the end of the day, do it as if Jesus is coming to do an inspection. Cindy? So do it the best way you can. And then after that, go and do what it is your heart tugs at. Okay? All right? I think at this point we can end this session.
Yes.
Yes, and remind you that for you to sustain a career in journalism, you've got to get your why clear. Sawa sawa? All right? Usifanye tu kwa sababu unataka kuongea kama Gladys ama unataka kuonekana kwa TV kama sijui nani. It's got to be something that will keep you pushing when things get tough, because this profession is not for the faint-hearted. Okay? It looks very easy, it looks very pretty, but what happens behind the scenes takes a lot of effort and hard work. Sawa sawa?
Yes.
All right, all the best. I'm glad that you've been able to enroll in this classes. They have taught you a lot and will keep teaching you a lot, and a lot of these things you'll reference them when you're older, and you'll see why it was important to invest in this. Sawa sawa?
Yes.
All right, all the best. Okay, thank you for listening to me. Huh?
Are we supposed to close our eyes again?
I don't think so.
No, you don't have to. It was a surprise.
It was a surprise. Now the surprise is out.
Was it a good surprise?